my pleasure to give you some insight into the research we develop in my group on quantum fluids of light in semiconductor lattices. So it's going to be essentially experiments that I will show you. So all the experiments have been done in the lab in Marcoussis, which is south of Paris, like typically 20-25 kilometers. And so all the samples are fabricated in the lab. The optical experiments and the analysis is also done in the group. So this lab, so our lab was before Laboratoire of Photonic and Nanostructure, and it has changed name 1 year ago. We have actually merged with another lab, and we will be moving very soon to the C2N, Center for Nanoscience and Nanotechnology, will open, and so we will move to this new building normally starting from the beginning of April 2018. So we have been discussing and announcing this for a long time, but normally this time, this is the year we should be there. So we are part of this very big campus that is going to develop very strongly in the forthcoming years close to Saclay. So it's called Paris-Saclay campus, and it's typically 20 kilometers from the city center of Paris. Okay, so we are working with semiconductor microcavities, and you will see that we engineer in our samples lattices, and we try to emulate different kinds of physical systems. And we are very much inspired by the physics that emerge in solid states. Ooh, I'm missing one. I just have to check. I don't know why there is a picture missing here. I hope it is not the beginning of a nightmare. Well, I don't know what happens. Well, let's hope this is the only one. So we were supposed to see a Josephson junction here. And so the idea that when you put two coherent states between a tunnel barrier, you have very interesting nonlinear physics emerging. You know that the graphene, so for example, a honeycomb lattice of carbon atoms has very interesting properties, which really comes from the geometry and the topology of this lattice. From topological arguments, you can also understand fractional quantum Hall effect and the fact that the resistance of your sample is quantized into discrete values, which are universal values, and which are related to edge states that you can also observe in topological insulators. So the idea is that there are very interesting properties arising in the solid states, which are related to the topology of the lattice and of the crystal. And so I'm just going to give some very basic ideas on topology. So you know that if you consider a surface, you have some properties which are local, like the curvature, the local curvature of the surface. And so this property is really sensitive to any deformation, any local deformation of the surface. On the other hand, you have properties which are global properties, which are very robust to deformation. And so, for example, this genus number, which is the integral over the entire surface of the local curvature. And so this genus number is a topological invariant, which is preserved whatever the kind of deformation you do. So for example, if you take this French croissant, which has a g equals 0 genus number, there is no way you can transform it into a donut, except if you dig a hole in the center. Okay, so these are two families which are completely different from several points of view and from topological arguments in particular. So if you look at now the solid state, so a crystal with a particular band structure, you have also properties which are local, like the energy dispersion, the wave function, and these are going to be very sensitive to local perturbation, to disorder, whereas you have properties like what is called the Chern number here, which is an integral over the entire Brillouin zone of this quantity, and this Chern number is extremely robust, is robust against local perturbation. And actually, the quantum Hall the integer quantum Hall effect, which was discovered in 1980, was revisited and reinterpreted in terms of topological properties and the existence of edge states that drive current at the edge of the sample. So actually, the notion of edge states is extremely important, and it comes from this so-called bulk edge correspondence, which tells you that if you want to build an interface between two materials which have different Chern numbers, there is no way you can continuously attach the two materials without creating edge states, which have some very interesting properties. And in particular, here, if you look at the edge state as a function of k, so if you sweep the k across the Brillouin zone, you see that the edge state will cross the gap. So you actually close the gap by putting these two materials close to each other. So this idea of topological physics have attracted a lot of interest, and in particular in photonics. So the idea being that can we build photonic lattices in which the transport of light would be governed by, for example, chiral edge states, which would then mean that the light would propagate straight and will never be backscattered, whatever the exact shape of the edges. And so there have been a lot of progress recently, and among them you probably all know about the pioneering work from Muhammad, who was using silicon resonators, a lattice of silicon resonators, to demonstrate transport of light through the edges. So there have been several of these work, and in particular a very interesting recent paper which came out this year in Science, demonstrating non-reciprocal lasing, so really lasing an injection of light in a chiral way when you couple a waveguide to these edge states. So most of these systems are actually linear systems, and so what we want to develop is try to use our semiconductor platform to try to see if we could actually also demonstrate such kind of topological chiral states and try to build lattices with interesting properties. So in particular, one of our holy grail, one of the motivation of the field is that when you consider a lattice of coupled resonators where you can control the coupling between adjacent sites, you have losses, so it's a dissipative system. So if you want to maintain a steady state, you want to pump your system continuously, so you will pump your system with a given frequency, and there are losses, and you have to overcome the losses. And then if you consider also that you have on-site nonlinearity, so on-site photon-photon interaction, then there is a lot of very interesting physics to explore, especially if the on-site interaction is larger than the losses. So then you can really enter the quantum regime and hope to see very interesting quantum correlation between photons being in different sites. So this is somehow the motivation of the physics we are developing, and the platform we are going to use is semiconductor microcavities, where you will see that the eigenstates of the system and all the properties of the system are governed by what is called exciton polaritons. So these excitonic polaritons became very famous, in particular after the publication of this paper in 2006, showing that you can, when you increase the power at which you pump the system, observe the analogous of a Bose-Einstein condensation, so the massive occupation of the lowest energy states. And then superfluidity could also be demonstrated. So you inject this polariton in a sample, and you look at their propagation across a defect, and you can demonstrate that if the interaction energy is large enough, you can completely suppress scattering, and so the fluid will just flow across the defect without any scattering. So the physics I would like to describe to you today and show you a bit where we go with the research in our group is that we are going to use this polariton quasi-particle and so we are going to create this quasi-particle in lattices of different shape. So you can see here, for example, 6 coupled pillars which are going to mimic the physics of a Bunsen photonic molecule. You see here a one-dimensional lattice, which has actually a phase frustration, so which will hold a flat band. And this is a honeycomb lattice, which mimics graphene. So we are going to study the physics of cavity polaritons in such lattices. So,
you put quantum in quotes. Are you going to tell us?
Sorry?
You have the word quantum in quotations. Are you going to tell us more about?
Yes, I'm going to tell you more about in the perspective. So for the moment, everything I will show is either in the linear regime or in the midfield regime. So really being like classical. And our goal is now really to boost interaction to go into the quantum regime. So this is going to be in the perspective. Before that, people talk about quantum fluids of light because it's a wave which has interaction, and you can nucleate quantized vortices. So the word quantized just means that you have a phase and that you have to obey some boundary conditions which quantize your levels and so on. So it's more like a first.
So it's quantum in the 20th century.
Exactly, not the 21st. We hope to go into the second revolution and be really quantum, okay? So for the moment, we are only poor classical physics, single particle physicists, but you will see that still it's quite funny what we do. Okay, so the outline of the talk will be the following. I'm going first to introduce cavity polaritons so that everybody can really understand what kind of sample we are using and how we create and how we observe these polaritons. And then I have chosen 3 examples of lattices where we have done different kinds of experiments. So I will describe the case of a quasi-periodic 1D potential, so a quasi-crystal, a 1D quasi-crystal. And I will show you that we can directly visualize a fractal energy spectrum, so a quite complex band structure. And that so we have plenty of little gaps opening in the dispersion relation, and that we can measure topological invariants which are related to these gaps. So then I will show you a one-dimensional change, which has a very interesting topological property. So I will show you that because of topological argument, there is an edge state which form at the end of the chain, and that we can trigger lasing in this edge state and see some topological robustness due to the topological nature of this lasing mode. And then I will show you some progress in the field of 2D honeycomb lattice. So I will show you that we can directly visualize Dirac cones and that we can manipulate these Dirac cones. And so I will show you an example of experiment that we could do on these lattices. And then I will finish with perspective, in particular discussing the quantum regime, how far we are from the real quantum regime. Okay, so I'm sorry all the titles are missing, but
We are
okay. So first, what cavity polaritons are. So the samples we are using are semiconductor samples. So it's a monocrystal, a stack of semiconductor layers. And typically, we work with the most controlled system, which is gallium arsenide, aluminum arsenide. So the growth of this material is very well controlled. And the etching also is very mature. We can really etch very nice structures. So first, what we grow is a mirror, a high reflectivity mirror, by stacking a large number of lambda over 4 layers of gallium arsenide, aluminum arsenide. So we grow 2 of these mirrors surrounding a thicker layer, which is going to be the cavity. So we have a cavity mode confined between the 2 mirrors. And if you look at the energy of this cavity mode as a function of the in-plane wave vector, which is equivalent as saying as a function of the incident angle, the energy is given by this expression. So because you are between 2 mirrors, you quantize Kz, the Kz of light. And if you look at this dispersion close to Kx and Ky equal to 0, you can make a Taylor expansion of this square root, and you end up with a dispersion which looks like this one, which is parabolic. So you can actually define an effective mass for photons. So photons, when they are confined between 2 planar mirrors, they behave as a massive particle when they propagate in the plane. and the effective mass is just given by the properties of your material, the thickness of the cavity, the index of refraction, and P is just an integer. Okay? So then inside the sample, we insert one or a few quantum wells, which are located on purpose at the antecedent of the electromagnetic field. So these quantum wells are also made by the same kind of semiconductors. So we sandwich a material with a lower band gap between two materials with a higher band gap, and this creates a two-dimensional quantum well for electrons and holes. And so when we excite the sample, we create high-energy electron-hole pairs, which will relax in the band and eventually form an electron-hole pair bound by Coulombic interaction, which is called an exciton. And this electron-hole pair, so it's a bosonic quasi-particle, can propagate inside the plane of the quantum well. And so its energy, its kinetic energy, is also described by a parabola. But here, the mass that you put is the mass of the exciton, so the sum of the mass of the electron and the hole. So if you plot the two dispersion, the photon dispersion and the exciton dispersion on the same graph, what you see is that the exciton looks completely flat because the exciton is 10,000 times heavier than the photon. Okay, so the photon is very light and has this parabola. The exciton has almost a flat dispersion because of its high effective mass. And so then we design the structure so that when an exciton eventually recombines and emits a photon, it's resonant with the photon of the cavity mode. So the photon will oscillate long enough inside the cavity to be reabsorbed, re-emitted, etc. And so at the end of the day, the eigenstates of the system are no more exciton or photon, but exciton-photon mixed quasi-particle, and we are in the strong coupling regime. So these quasi-particles, they have this peculiar dispersion relation, which comes from the formation of this mixed quasi-particle. So they were first discovered and reported experimentally in 1992 by Claude Weisbuch. So these polaritons are the linear superposition of an exciton and a photon. So from their photonic component, because they have this photonic component, they are very big objects. So we are working in the visible, and the typical area of a polariton state is of the order of, has a diameter of more than 1 or 2 or 3 microns. So if you build a, yes?
So I was wondering, in gallium arsenide, you have heavier light holes. So do you have just one type of exciton here, or there?
So what we do is we always work with quantum wells where the light hole, heavy hole splitting is large enough so that we can just play with the heavy hole exciton. So either we work with in-gas quantum well, where because of strain, the light hole is at much higher energy, or we work with a narrow enough gallium arsenide quantum well so that the heavy hole is not there. We have in the past worked with much wider quantum well, where we see then the anti-crossing, both the formation of light hole, of heavy hole exciton polariton and light hole exciton polariton. And you see an anti-crossing with the two kinds of excitons. Does it answer? You want to do that? Okay. So here we work, here it's a gallium arsenide quantum well, and the light hole is at higher energy. And we just zoom in the region where we have the crossing between the photon line and the heavy hole exciton. Okay? So what I was saying is that the photonic, because of the photonic component, polaritons are big objects, and if you want to laterally confine them to engineer their band structure, you don't need to go at the nanoscale. Micron scale is largely enough. So we will work with microstructure with typical dimension of a few microns, which is much easier to fabricate and to control. What you will see also is that we always detect the photons coming out from the sample. So thanks to this photonic component, we directly have access to all the physical properties of polariton inside the sample. And then, thanks to this matter part, the excitonic component, polariton present a very strong chi-3 nonlinearity, so a Kerr-like nonlinearity. There is gain in the structure, so you can have the system reach the lasing regime. And also interestingly is that excitons are sensitive to a magnetic field. They can acquire Zeeman splitting, which means that these polaritons, which are photonic light particles, they also can have a Zeeman splitting when you apply a magnetic field. So how do we measure these polaritons? We measure photons escaping through the mirror. And so since K parallel is conserved during the propagation through all the layers, actually a given polariton, when it emits light, it will emit a photon which come out with a given angle which corresponds exactly to the in-plane wave vector. So, and the energy will be that of the polariton. So if you measure the emission as a function of angle, if you directly image the luminescence as a function of angle, you get this picture. This is actually an experimental measurement. You see directly the dispersion of your polaritons. You can look at the emission in real space also. You will see a lot of examples later on. And so you can measure the density in real space. You can do interferometry and image vortices or solitons. And you can also access the G1 and G2, so the temporal, the spatial coherence, and also the photon statistics. And also interestingly, you can excite your sample resonantly, for example, populating this particular states, which will create a polariton flow, a coherent polariton flow going to the left of the room. And you can follow them in real time, measure their group velocity, their density, and so on. So these are the spectroscopic tools we use to study this polariton fluid. So now I would like to enter the core of the talk, which is about polariton lattices. So let us first just go into a very simple structure, which is a 1D structure. So imagine that we deposit a mask on the planar cavity, and then we bombard the system with ions, and we remove completely all the material that is left, was here. And so we end up with a one-dimensional structure, which here is a few hundred micron long, but only a few micron large. Okay, so in this case, we also, because of the index of refraction contrast between air and semiconductor, we laterally confine our polaritons. And so when we look at the angularly resolved emission, we see 1D subbands directly in the emission. Okay, so each subband corresponds to a different value of Kx. So now if we want to imagine that to implement a 1D periodic potential, what we are going to do is to make a 1D structure, but modulate laterally the transverse dimension of the wire, so confine more or less laterally polaritons. And this will implement such a potential for our polariton states. Then if you look at what you expect to open gaps corresponding to your periodicity, and this is what we directly see when looking at the far field. So we see directly the formation of mini bands and mini gaps according to the design we have done. So then one thing that we were interested in is to try to implement a quasi-crystal for polaritons. So try to induce, to modulate the lateral dimension of our wires, but in a quasi-periodic way. So the quasi-periodic potential, probably most of you know, it's quite a peculiar state of matter where you have no long when at the same time you have long range order but no translation invariance, translation symmetry invariance. So it's really between an amorphous. So it's between an amorphous material and a periodic crystal. So it has some order but no long range order. So the quasi-periodic potential we have chosen is the Fibonacci potential. So there are several methods to generate a Fibonacci sequence, but the one we have used is this one, which was proposed in this paper. So you consider a lattice with sites, and the number of each site is j. And for each values of j, you calculate this expression, you calculate the sign of this expression. And sigma is the golden mean in this expression. And so each time you get +1, so something which is positive, for this side you will address +1. And if it's negative, you will address -1. And so then you end up with a series of +1, -1, -1, +1, and so on, and they follow a Fibonacci sequence. And what we decided to do is to to assign, for example, to +1 a certain width of the wire, and to -1 another width. And you see that we engineer a Fibonacci structure by making a series of regions which have a WA width or WB width following a Fibonacci potential. Okay? So what do we expect? So in analogy to the Bloch theorem, where you know that you will open gaps and have mini bands with the same number of states in each band, when you have a Fibonacci potential, you have the analogous of the Bloch theorem, but it's called the gap labeling theorem. And it tells you that you can open gaps for any value of k, which will obey these relationships, where p and q are two integers, and sigma is again the golden mean. And the density of state you will get is quite complex, so it has steps, but not of equal height, and they are not equally spaced, and the integrated density of state is given by this expression. So what we did is implement this Fibonacci potential and image the band structure. And what did we see? What did we observe? We observed this kind of band of dispersion, which looks much more complicated. So here it's a 1D structure with 233 letters, A, B, A, and so on. And so what you see is that we have plenty of gaps which open, and indeed we could find these two numbers, P and Q, for each of the gaps. So we could really attribute these two numbers for each of the gaps, and you see that the theory reproduces quite nicely the band structure we observe. So this is in K-space. We can also look at the mode in real space. So this is how it looks. So you see you have three bands and two gaps, and then inside you have more complicated gaps. So this is the theory, the experiment. So emission as a function of energy and position along the wire. And this is the theory. And you see that actually there are plenty of little details, so maybe you don't see so well, but there are details in the real space that we could think it's disorder, but it is reproduced by the theory. So it's really an emulator of a quasi-crystal with Fibonacci modes, which you can image both in real and reciprocal space. So what is interesting is that we can also measure the integrated intensity and actually retrieve the density of states and the integrated density of states. So this is what the integrated density of states looks like compared to the theory. And what you find, what you see here is that you have actually three bands and two main gaps. And then you see that in each band, you have again three bands and two gaps. And then if you would zoom in further, you would again find that. So there is a fractal structure of this Fibonacci structure. So just to come back here, you see we have three bands and two gaps. And then inside here, we have again three bands and two gaps. And if you zoom here, you have again three bands and two gaps, okay? And we are limited by the spectral line width of our polaritons. So the best way to look at that, to look at this self-similarity, is to look at things in log scale. And so here it's the integrated density of state as a function of the energy in log scale. So the theory tells you that you have these oscillations which reflect this self-similarity. And we could observe these log periodic oscillations. So if you look at the experiment, we have 1, 2, 3. If you are very optimistic, maybe a bit more, but like say 3 oscillations. So we were really able to implement a fractal spectrum for photons. And there was also a very interesting experiment done in the microwave almost simultaneously. So then we progressed in our understanding of the field, and we realized, reading papers, that in each of these gaps, there are actually topological invariants that are characterizing all of these gaps. And we were very much inspired by this paper, which came in 2000, you can see it here, in 2012. And they were looking at a different quasi-crystal, which is the Aubry-André quasi-crystal, which is defined by this Hamiltonian. So it's a tight banding Hamiltonian. You have sites n, n plus 1, n minus 1. And so what is very important is that here you have an on-site potential energy, which is irrational with an irrational number. And so what they found by studying this model is that there is a complete mapping to the lattice version of the integer quantum Hall. So the integer quantum Hall can be described also by such a tight-bending Hamiltonian. So this was very nicely explained in this paper from Hofstetter. And what is important to notice, so B here is the flux in each plaquette, so it's related to the strength of the magnetic field. And what is important to see is that this number phi that we have in the quasi-crystal, which is called the phazon, plays exactly the same role as the in-plane as the wave vector in the quantum Hall effect. Which means that in the quantum Hall effect, what we saw is that when we sweep K, edge states traverse the gap. It means that here in this quasi-crystal, if we sweep phi, edge states could form and traverse the gap also. So there is a way to evidence that there are topological invariants and to sweep a certain dimension, synthetic dimension, which is phi, to really see the traverse of edge states. So that's what they did with coupled waveguides. They could adiabatically change their structure along the propagation and see that injecting light from one edge of the structure, they could have the system, the light come out from the other edge, and they could show that indeed, so these are simulations, that edge states can traverse the gap when you scan phi. Okay? So we then collaborated with Eric Ackermann from Technion, who was really interested in this quasi-crystal, and he proposed a method to actually show that in this fractal spectrum, where you have all these little gaps which are labeled, you could see edge states and measure topological invariants. So the way he's proposing the experiment is to make a certain Fibonacci structure and then scan phi and make another one. So when you scan phi, you will suddenly change some motif. So AB will switch into BA, and you will get a new structure. And then when you scan further, AB will somewhere else will also change. And so what he proposed is to build a palindromic structure. So you take a Fibonacci structure and you attach it to the symmetric one. And what he's proposing is that we should visualize edge states in each gap, exactly here, and we should be able to see them traverse the gap when we scan phi. So more precisely, this is a theoretical paper. You see the log period, the density of states. So each gap corresponds to, each line, horizontal line corresponds to a gap. And what they show is that there are edge states which will propagate and traverse the gaps as you sweep phi. And the number of traverse is a winding number, which is equal to 2 times Q, Q being one of the numbers we use to label the gaps. So for example, here, let's choose this gap. This gap has a Q equal to +2. And you see that when we sweep phi, the edge states traverse the gap 4 times. If we look at these gaps, which has a Q equal to -2, there again, they traverse the gap 4 times, but in reverse direction because it's Q equal to -2. Here, Q equal to -1, to +1, you see that it traversed the gap only twice. So we did the experiment. So we fabricated different wires corresponding to different values of phi, and we looked at the band structure and also at the mode in real space across this interface between the two symmetric parts. So one example of a structure that we see is shown here. So you see a palindromic structure. You see that we have these 2 gaps and the main band and so on, so the fractal spectrum. But you see that here in these 2 gaps, we have edge states. And these edge states, if we look at them in real space, you see that they are strongly localized across the interface. We see them directly in real space. And then we could follow these edge states, varying, so looking at different wires with different values of phi, and you see that we can directly measure these topological invariants. So for example, here, we have a Q equal to -1, and we see that the modes traverse twice. Here, Q equal to +2, and the modes traverse 4 times, okay, and in agreement with the theory. So actually, this kind of method is not only restricted to quasi-crystal. There are plenty of different structures that we can engineer and look at edge states and measure topological invariance. Okay? So this is an example of emulation of a 1D lattice. So now I would like to, I don't know where I am in time. It's okay. Where am I? It's okay?
We have about 20 minutes with questions.
Ooh, okay. What I showed you until now was like more like a free particle approach. So we were studying starting from a 1D system and then applying a perturbation, periodic or quasi-periodic perturbation. The other approach we use is a bit different. It's more like a tight banding approach, where we are going to take one building block, which is a single pillar, and then we will couple it to different structure, to different pillars. So this is forming, for example, here a diatomic molecule, a benzene molecule, or a more complex system. So what we do is we first consider a single pillar. So in a single pillar, we confine polariton in all dimensions. And so if you look at the emission of such a single pillar as a function of position, you see that the lowest energy state has a maximum at the center of the pillar. So we will call it a S orbital because it has a maximum at the center. Then the second state has a 0 at the center and 2 lobes on each side. It looks like a p orbital and it's twice degenerate. And so on. We have d and so on, d waves. And then when we couple, for example, in a diatomic molecule, 2 of these micropillars, we will hybridize the states in each micropillar. So for example, here, the S states in each pillar will form bonding and anti-bonding mode, which we can directly image. And then we can go to more complicated structure. So here, what I would like to show you is a one-dimensional lattice which implements an SSH chain and which has very interesting topological properties. So the SSH chain, so Su-Schrieffer-Heeger chain, was introduced to describe the physical properties of a polyacetylene molecule. And so it's described by a tight banding Hamiltonian where you couple, so a line of atoms, and you modulate the amplitude of the coupling between 2 neighbored atoms. So you have 2 values, T and T prime, and you have a periodicity in the coupling. So when you calculate this Hamiltonian, which can be described by this matrix, what you find is that if T is different from T prime, you open gaps. And the width of the gap is typically the difference between T and T prime. And so you can actually show that there is a winding number, so a topological properties, which come from an integral over K, which tells you, so which is equal, so this winding number is equal to 0 if T is larger than T prime. So if you start with a strong bound, and it's equal to 1 if you start with a weak bound. And this means that if you make an interface between this chain and the material, for example, the vacuum, you expect to see an edge states for this particular chain, for the chain which has a W equal to 1. So you will understand, so in this chain of micropillars, we are going to hybridize the S orbitals and the P orbitals, and you will understand immediately that we actually implement an SSH chain for the P orbitals. You see that the P orbitals, they are twice degenerate, and for the PX manifold, you see that you have a modulation of the coupling. Here we start with a strong bond, and then weak bond, strong bond, and for the PY, it's the opposite. So this manifold will have a winding number equal to 1, whereas this one will have a winding number equal to 0. And so if you calculate the modes, what you get is that indeed, in the PY orbitals, you expect to see edge states, so 2 edge states, one on each chain, and nothing for the PX orbital. And if you look at the states in the band, so if you look at the amplitude, the probability amplitude of the modes, summing all the bulk mode, you see that in the PX, in the trivial, so-called trivial change, the modes are completely delocalized over the entire chain, whereas in the PY, so in the topological chain, you see that the bulk modes are delocalized over the chain, the entire chain, except the first and last pillar. So on the first pillar, you only have a significant probability for the edge states and vanishing probability for the bulk states.
Excuse me, Jennifer.
Yes.
On this graph G, which is X and Y?
X is this,
No,
Y is there.
I see under the off to the left.
So it's the direction of the bond. Okay?
I
So
see, okay.
it's a zigzag chain, and so this is X and this is Y. Okay? And the direction of the wire is at 45 degrees. Okay?
How do you selectively excite Px or Py?
We don't selectively excite. They are degenerate. We are going to pump non-resonantly, and we are going to excite them together. But we can image them, and looking at the orientation of the way of the lobes, we can distinguish between Px and Py.
But wouldn't you go into a superposition of then Px and Py?
You will see. Yes, we will have a superposition in the bulk, but at the edge, you see that for Px, for the edge pillar, in the gap, there is, of course, only Py, and in the bulk, there is only Px. And for the rest, we have a linear superposition. Linear. We have the incoherent emission of anything, of everything. So this is the band structure we measure on this 1D chain. When we look at the bulk, so what you see is the S band. This is the P bands with these big gaps because of the modulation of the coupling, and then above you have the D bands. And what you see when we overlap the edge, so we look both at the bulk and at the edge, you see that in addition, we have a state which is in the gap. And now we can actually look at the real space emission, selecting the energy. So we can, for example, look at the energy of the S band at k equals 0, and this is what we find. So you see that we have emission above, on all pillars, and that there is a maximum at the center, which is typical for the S band. Then we can look at the P bands. So this is the lower P band, this is the upper P band, and you see that we have a 0 in the middle of each pillar, which is characteristic of the P modes. And then we can select just the edge states, just the states in the gap, sorry, and what we see is that it is essentially localized on the very end pillar. And so we recognize the orientation of the two lobes, which is Py, and you see that for the bulk states, we recognize the orientation of the Px, okay? So we can really see that we have this chain with Px orbitals, which is trivial, and for Py, we have all these edge states. You understand?
But we should see also Py bugs, right?
Yes, you see Py. You see that here it's a mixture, okay? So then what we did is just increase. So we pump the system with a long spot. We excite non-resonantly. We populate all the states. And what we did is increase the excitation power, just putting more and more polariton in the system. And eventually, we observe a lasing threshold. So suddenly, there is a lot of macroscopic population in one of the states or in some states that we can image. And what we found, so we were quite lucky, so we are not lucky. We have tuned the gain with respect to the band. So we did many of this SSH chain, and there is, in a region, the gain of the laser is perfectly matched to this region of photonic mode. And what you see is that, indeed, the laser starts to laser, so decided is triggered into these topological states. So we pump the whole chain, overlapping, of course, the end of the chain. And what we see is that the system chooses to laze in the topological states. So the question then so why is it choosing this mode? We think that it's because all the other modes, so there are plenty of modes which are degenerate, and there is a very strong mode competition, and there is nobody clear, no clear mode which could win against the others. Where here in the gap, you have a very peak density of state. There is just one mode, and so eventually this is this mode which starts to laze. So then the question is, how do we have a lasing on a topological state, or do we have a topological laser? So what does it mean? It means, does this laser have some particular robustness with respect to a regular laser? So I just want to say I'm fully aware that this is an edge state which is 0 dimension. There is no propagation, so it's really a toy model. It's the simplest topological system you can find. So we tried to analyze what is the robustness of this laser. So if you go back to this Hamiltonian and the symmetry of this Hamiltonian, so one property, which is called chiral symmetry, is the fact that it has a 0 on the diagonal, so it commutes with sigma z. And this symmetry tells you that the eigenspectrum is symmetric around 0. You have a particle-hole symmetry, and particle-antiparticle or electron-hole symmetry. And it means that edge states have 0 energy. So what you can introduce disorder on T and T prime, as long as you don't change the diagonal, the states will remain at 0 energy. So this we have not checked experimentally, but we have done simulation. We introduce fluctuations in T and T prime, and you see that the bands becomes very broad, but the topological states remain at 0 energy, and the localization of the states remain very strongly localized on the first pillar, as long as the mode does not hybridize with the bulk band. Okay, so this is some protection which come from this this chiral symmetry of the lattice. Then what about chiral symmetry? If we break the chiral symmetry, how does this mode behave? So to do that in the theory, what we did is the most brutal things we can do to this poor edge state is to change the on-site energy of the first pillar, because the edge state sits there. So we are going to blue shift to change the energy by an amount U1 of this first site. And what we see is that then we break the chiral symmetry, so the mode is no more at 0 energy. It blue shifts proportionally to U1, the potential. And what is interesting is that the localization stays actually very good as long as the mode stays within the gap. Okay, so we have some reminiscence robustness regarding the localization when we change the on-site energy. So how can we test that experimentally? We can test that very easily because when we pump the system, we create many electron-hole pairs, and there is a repulsive potential which blue shifts locally the states under the microscope. So what we did is an experiment where we not only excite we don't excite the whole chain, we only excite the first pillar, and by pumping harder and harder, we blue shift this pillar progressively. And so what we saw is that, of course, then when we only pump the first pillar, the edge state is starting to lace. This is not a big surprise. And what we see is that for the highest power we have investigated, the mode still remains localized in the first pillar. So this is summarized here. We look at the localization of the first pillar as a function of U1, which is the blue shift we create on the first pillar. And you see that the modes remain very localized. So we think that there is some robustness, so the localization is very robust because of the origin, the topological origin of this lasing mode, and that's why we dare to call it a topological laser. Okay, so what is next? Of course, it's much more interesting to go to 2D lattices and to look at topologically protected transport. So how can we do that with our system? So we can, for example, follow these proposals where they propose to use a honeycomb lattice of micropillar and to break time reversal symmetry by applying a magnetic field. So we need polariton with a strong Zeeman splitting, and then what they propose is that you should see, so this is a simulation, not yet an experimental work, you should see propagation along the edge, and you see that here they have removed one pillar, and light is nicely going around the pillar without any backscattering. So we are presently working very hard, developing quantum wells with strong enough Zeeman splitting. It's not completely obvious, but we are on our way to try to do that. So before finishing, I would like to show you our honeycomb lattices, so of micropillar, which you see are quite nicely etched. And this is the band structure we measure when we directly look at their emission. And you see that the lowest part of the band structure come from the hybridization of the S-band, and you directly see the Dirac cones. And if you make a cut at this energy, you see the 6 Dirac points, K and K prime, which are characteristic of this lattice. We can also engineer edges. So here you see a lattice where we have implemented the 3 possible edges that we can do. A zigzag and armchair edge, like in graphene, and also this one, birded edge, which has 3 pillars at the surface, so which would not be stable in a real material, but our poor pillar, they cannot move, so they have to stay like this. And we can actually study the edge states in such a structure and visualize them directly. So here I show you the example of a zigzag edge where we see the edge states in K-space and in real space. Okay? So just to finish, I would like to show you a recent experiment we have done. So there are plenty of things also to be done with the P states. I'm not going to describe this, but we see very interesting edge states in the P band. And so one experiment we have done recently is to mimic strained graphene. So strained graphene means that we are going to stretch or compress the lattice in one direction. So you see we are going to change T2 with respect to T1. And so we are going to, for example, hope to see this effect, which was described by Gilles Montambeau in 2009, which is the fact that, so you see here the Dirac points when you don't apply a strain. And then what is expecting is that if you start to stretch your, to compress your crystal, the Dirac cones will go closer to each other. Eventually, they would merge, and then a gap will open. So this is a topological phase transition. So because there is a winding number here around the Dirac cone, there is no way you can open a gap. You have really to merge 2 Dirac cones with opposite Chern number. They annihilate, and then you can open a gap. And what is interesting is that at the merger here, the Hamiltonian is described by this, the system is described by this Hamiltonian, and it presents a Dirac-like dispersion, a linear dispersion in one direction, and a parabolic dispersion in the other. So you have a particle which has a parabolic dispersion for the motion in one direction, and a Dirac dispersion in the other one. So it's called a semi-Dirac particle. So what we want to do is to try, so we are not going to do that. We are going to do many lattices, one close to the other, corresponding to different values of beta. So we change the center-to-center distance between the pillar. And so what do we see? So this is for beta equal 1, where we have the Dirac cone and Dirac points. And then we could actually observe the merger of the 2 Dirac cones for beta equal 2. And you see that in one direction here along X, I have a linear dispersion. And along the orthogonal direction, I mean, along Y, it's not orthogonal because we have these angles, it's parabolic. So we have actually realized a system in which photons propagate and behave as semi-Dirac particle. And then for larger beta, the gap opens. Okay? So we have, I mean, there are also very interesting things going on in the P bands that I think I completely run out of time. So I just want briefly to show you what are our perspectives. So we absolutely want to implement a Zeeman splitting to break time reversal symmetry and try to see these edge states. I did not show you, but we see new types of Dirac cones when we look at the P bands and we strain the lattice. So this is very new and the first time it's seen in any system. And then, of course, we would like to do transport. So see the transport properties of such, for example, semi-Dirac quasi-particle. We can also engineer a lattice with a flat band. And so there is also very interesting physics related to phase frustration. And then we have strong Kerr nonlinearity. So in all of these lattices, we can investigate soliton, B-stability, self-trapping. So we have really a nonlinear system. And then, of course, what about quantum? So what we would like is to have, so we reach the quantum regime when we have so when we will be sensitive to single polariton nonlinearity. So when we can see single particle effect, which means that we would like to have an interaction energy, an on-site energy in our pillars, U, which should overcome gamma, so that we can have polariton blockade, so like the photon blockade. So gamma is the line width of our polariton, which is essentially related to the lifetime of photon inside the sample. So U is proportional to the polariton and polariton interaction divided by the area of the micropillar. And so by doing a nonlinear experiment, this interaction constant has been evaluated experimentally, and it corresponds actually also to theory. And typically, the J, the interaction constant, is of the order of a few micro-eV micron square, which means that if you take a 1 micron micron square area pillar, we need a Q factor, so a gamma, so we need to really have a very small gamma corresponding to a Q superior to 10 to the 6. So typically now the best cavity are more of the order of 10 to the 5, and they are of the order of 10 to the 5 in much larger pillar, because when you make the pillar very small, of the order of 1 micron square, you start to be very sensitive to the scattering of photons through the edges. So this is a number we are not going to succeed. We are typically a factor of 10 or 50 off. So U over gamma in our lattices is of the order of 0.02, 0.05, and not yet equal to 1. So how can we overcome that? So of course we can work on the technology, but it's going to be really at the edge of what we can do. And so there are several possibilities which are now proposed and explored, in particular in the group of Atachi Momoguru, to try to use different kinds of excitons, more fragile excitons, which would be more sensitive to each other. And so there are several proposals, and we are going to also try to include that in lattices and see if we can manage. Okay, so before finishing, I would like to acknowledge all our collaborators. So we work with quite a lot of different theoreticians. French one, the group of Guillaume Malpuech. We have a very nice collaboration with Gilles Montambeau. We are working also with Cristiano Ciuti, Jacopo Carusoto, Michiel Wouters, Eric Ackermann, Akan Turecci. So we are very happy to work with all these people. And before finishing, I would like to acknowledge all the collaborators at C2N. So in particular, you have understood that the growth and the etching of the sample is really a key issue. And so we are very very thankful to Aristide Lemaitre, who is growing all the sample, and Isabelle Sagne, who is etching everything. And I would like also to particularly acknowledge Alberto Amo, who has been working over the last years in the group with me together, and we were leading the group together. So he moved to a lab in Lille, but we will still continue to work together as a single group in 2 different places. Okay, and with this, I would like to thank you a lot for your attention.